اهلا بيكم في دروس احياء الصف الثالث ثانوي. النهارده هنكمل كلامنا عن الدعامة. Support and movement in living organisms. So let's begin. Before we discuss the appendicular skeleton and the axial skeleton in human beings, now we'll study the rest of the components of the support in man, like the cartilages and tendons and etc. So we will start with the cartilages. cartilages يعني الغضاريف اللي موجودة في الجسم. هي نوع من النسيج الضام أو الكونكتيف تيشو، وفيها cells, special type of cells اسمها cartilaginous cells found at the tips of bones. tips of bones معناها يعني في المفاصل اللي بين البونز. Especially at joints and between the vertebra of the vertebral column to protect the bones from corrosion due to continuous friction. Okay, so the cartilaginous cells موجودة at the tips of bones, especially in the joints, of course, to protect against friction, علشان تحمي البون من الفriction. Also, the cartilages are components of some body parts like the ear, like the nose, like the bronchioles and bronchi. See the cartilaginous discs in the bronchi and bronchioles. Okay, the nose is made of cartilage, the ear is made of cartilage. Don't forget that. والحنجرة كمان is made of cartilage, which is the larynx. في معلومة مهمة في معلومة مهمة عن الكارتلج، وهي أن الكارتلجز do not contain blood vessels. مال بيجيبوا التغذية بتاعتهم ازاي؟ By diffusion from the nearby bone cells. So the cartilages do not contain blood vessels. They get the food and oxygen from the bone cells by diffusion عن طريق الانتشار. افتكروا المعلومة دي ان ال cartilages do not have blood vessels. Okay, so let's move to joints. Joints المفاصل يعني. There are different types of joints. There are fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, synovial joints. You will study these in details in medicine, of course. In the human skeleton, you will find these different kinds of joints: fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. Synovial اختصار لكلمة شبه البيضة، لأن الجوينت بتبقى شبه البيضة اللي ليها قشرة وليها غشاء من جوه. نفس الحكاية synovial joints. Now we'll start with the fibrous joints. The joints, as you can see here, see this zigzag line? These are fibrous joints. Fibrous joints of the suture type do not allow movement لأنها تعتبر كأنها صمغ لازق البون في بعضه يعني. And by growing older, its fibrous tissue change into bony tissue. So with time, the fibrous tissue that forms the fibrous joint changes into bony tissue. Okay, these joints are found mainly in the skull. They connect the bones of the skull together through the zigzag line tips, and they have no movements. They have no movements. The cartilaginous joints, on the other hand, between the ends of bones and allow, a limited type of movement. زي الكارتلجز اللي موجودة between الvertebra of the vertebral column اللي هي بنسميها disc, cartilaginous disc. This is the cartilage between the vertebrae, the cartilaginous disc. Okay? It allows for slight movements of the vertebral column, slight movement. مش free movement ولا هي no movement at all. Okay? These are the cartilaginous joints. The synovial joints, as I told you before, it looks like an egg, as you can see here. This is an egg-like joint. This is another egg-like joint. And they represent, the synovial joints represent most of the body joints. The bones in contact in the joints covered with delicate layer of cartilaginous substance, and that allows movements of bones easily with less friction. So in the synovial joints, the tips of bones are covered by a layer of cartilage to prevent, the damage due to friction. And it's flexible joints. بتتحمل الصدمات, bears shocks, trauma. Okay, these joints contain synovial fluid, which facilitates the sliding of cartilages that covers the bones. Okay, and they have free mobility. So remember this, that the major difference between the synovial and the cartilaginous joints, they are freely mobile. Most of them are freely mobile, not all of them. And the tips of bones are covered by cartilage to prevent damage due to friction. And it has a capsule from the outside like the shell of an egg, and it has a membrane called the synovial membrane that lines this shell. That's why it's called synovial, that resembles an egg. Examples of the synovial joints, we have the shoulder, the elbow, the hip, and the knee joints. Now for the elbow, the الكوع, and the knee joint, الركبة, they are considered as limited movement joints because they allow only movement in, one axis, one direction, either flexion or extension, for example. Okay, it's only one axis. But on the other hand, the shoulder joint and the hip joint, they have wide range of movements in almost in all directions, which allow the movement of bones in many directions around multiple axes. So in the elbow and the knee joint, there's only one axis. Okay, so that's why they're classified as limited movement type. And in the shoulder and the hip joint, they have wide range of movement because they have multiple axes. Okay, like for example, the shoulder joint, you can move it this way and up and down, and even circulatory movement. Okay, that's called circumduction. So this is the main difference between the different types of synovial joints in the body. So do not forget this, please. The fibrous joints, remember the skull. Cartilaginous joints, remember the vertebral column and the symphysis pubis. And remember that we have the ears, the nose made of cartilage. And they are not joints, of course. And the synovial joints, remember the elbow, the shoulder, and the hip and the knee joints. Let's move to other type of tissues that important in the support in human beings, like the ligaments. Ligaments يعني أربطة، يعني اعتبروها زي شرايط السيلوتيب كده، شرايط اللزق اللي بتربط البونز ببعض. They are made of bundles of fibrous connective tissue, and the tips are fixed on the two bones of the joint, so it adheres two bones together. Okay, by adhering to or approximating the ends of joints of bones together, they determine the movement of the joint in different directions. معناها انها بسبب انها شريط لاصق بيربط البونز ببعض، معناها انها بتحدد اتجاه الحركة اللي موجودة في الجوينت اللي هي موجودة فيها. They have very strong fibers, high durability, بيتحملوا كتير يعني, and there is a degree of elasticity to allow a little increase in their length, not to be so as not to be torn during the exposure of the external pressure. Okay, so they have a degree of elasticity. In some cases, the ligament may be ruptured, torn, due to twisting of some joints, and the famous ligaments that gets ruptured in football are the cruciate ligaments. See, these are the الرباط الصليبي. هو ده الرباط الصليبي اللي موجود في الركبة. The cruciate ligaments. We have anterior cruciate ligament and posterior cruciate ligaments. So these are the ligaments and their function. Their function is to hold the ends of bones together and to determine the movement of the joint in different directions. Do not forget that it's made of fibrous tissue, but have little elasticity so as to change their length and not to get torn easily by the movements of their joints. The last thing we're going to talk about are the tendons, الأوتار. They are strong connective tissue, link the muscles with the bones, like this tendon, for example. This is tendon Achilles. Links the muscle, the gastrocnemius and soleus, together with the bone, which is the heel bone. The heel bone is called calcaneus. Of course, any terms or names we outside the book, do not pay attention to it, okay? So we have the tendons. They are the ends of muscles and connect to bones. And the famous tendon is the Achilles tendon, the one you can see here, okay, connecting the muscles to the heel bone. Okay, the tendon sometimes exposed to damage because of violent movements or something, okay, or sudden muscle contraction. It's well known that, like the Achilles tendon tearing, and also in football, there is a side effect of or type of injury in which this tendon gets partially torn or completely torn. When the Achilles tendon is torn, one will lose ability to walk, inability of walking. There will be heavy movement of foot, and there will be acute pain that can be treated with anti-inflammatory and analgesic drugs. And we use the medical splint to control the case, and sometimes surgical intervention is needed. Okay? Surgical intervention needed only in complete rupture of the tendon. So to summarize the tendons, they are the end of muscles. They are made of fibrous tissue. They connect the muscle to the bone for the muscle to be able to move the bone. The famous tendon is Achilles tendon. That's attached to the heel bone. Okay, and sometimes this tendon Achilles, like any other tendons, gets torn or partially torn, like in football. And when the Achilles tendon is torn, there will be inability to walk. There will be heavy movement of foot. Please remember this. And there will be acute pain. How to control it? We control it with analgesics and anti-inflammatory drugs. We control it with splints, and surgical intervention only when there is complete tearing of the tendon. Okay, we talked about the different components of the support in man. I hope you got the maximum benefit of this lecture, and thank you very much for watching.